Sledge 315 here, doing something different, doing a different segment of involvement with the Call of Duty League. This is not officiated or official through the league or through the Subliners. It's just something that I personally want to do, and I think it's going to be pretty helpful for you guys because I've been looking all online and there's not a lot of information on statistics per match. So we're going to jump right into this, guys. I'm going to tackle it game by game, and then we're going to do month by month, of course, as the games come along. So I was thinking to do the whole weekend and then decided, you know what, we'll do them per game. It'll be definitely easier for me to nail down the details for you guys. All right, guys, first on the list, this is from yesterday's games, their set of games. They're basically set into Domination, Hardpoint, and Search and Destroy. For anyone that isn't familiar with Call of Duty League, you guys might want to familiarize yourself with that. I'll give you a link so we can get the information on how those are all set, the rules, restrictions, etc. It's 5v5 situations, and this week on Saturday for launch weekend, the New York Subliners played London Royal Ravens and unfortunately came out with a loss, but we will go into detail as to what happened and maybe break down some of the statistics for you guys. The first on the set list was a Hardpoint match based on Azhir Cave, and basically it starts off pretty smooth for both ends. It looks like the New York Subliners had a little bit of control early game. They got the first point middle of the map, and they started off really well, but it seems like they lost a little bit of their control along the way. What seemed to happen is when they first jumped onto the first point, Attach got a few early picks and then claimed the zone, but then it looked like the Ravens actually set themselves back quite a bit and then got some fair, clean picks before they progressed in. And then when they had empty open slots because of players down waiting and respawn, they had an opportunity to push and then hold some and get some points for themselves. As for the second point, as we move on, it moves into the cave, into the back point spawn of the Ravens. The issue with this one for the Subliners, I believe, is it was in the advantage of the Ravens to kind of start. Everyone knows the rotation of the map, but it was kind of on the back line for the Ravens in favor. So they backed up onto the point and they held it, and unfortunately it seemed like the Subliners couldn't get in and get, you know, recalibrated enough to actually claim any points on this zone. They might have touched it for a short period of time. I can't fully remember based off the reel, but for the most part, Ravens held the second point very strong. Moving on to the third point, it goes back to the outside. Accuracy got a few picks to start, and he got down on the point early to start claiming a bunch of points. And at this point, the game was still fairly tied because point 1 was held by Subliners, where point 2 was held by the Ravens. So Accuracy held this down as long as he could, but for some reason, his team just couldn't get to where he was holding down the point. And eventually, after a few picks, Accuracy's taken down, and the Ravens take over on the Subliners and start gaining points. At this point, the Subliners were very, very close to tying the game and evening it out because the game was really, really close in terms of the score at this point. Moving on to the fourth point, guys, unfortunately, this one worked in favor of the Ravens again, and Dylan actually held this one back from the cliff point of view. There's a little spot on the edge of the map where you can sit and you can kind of post up, and the New York Subliners kind of kept running in, not necessarily feeding, but basically as they got closer, they kind of got curved because this guy was just sitting there popping picks and getting those additional securities for his team while they collected the points. He sat off on the side and got those picks. There's a few points in time where I feel that the New York Subliners could have improved with some of where they were in terms of placement and protection. There was a point where Temp actually ran in and he took shots from his right as he was running into the mid building that one of the Ravens was defending, shooting out of a window. And I think he knew that guy was up there based on sound, and he kind of went hungry for the kill, and because of that, he kind of disregarded the guy that tagged him, and that guy followed him in, and he pretty much got himself sandwiched right there. And I feel that if maybe he stopped, hesitated, turned around, shot the guy that shot him first, and then took care of the guy inside the building, they might have been able to capitalize on that. At this point, guys, the Ravens start to actually take over, earn a little bit of momentum, and they're holding a lot more time on points. It goes back to the first point that was set on the map, and one of the Ravens players actually hides behind the wall, and he's just collecting the points while his team's getting the picks. He occasionally pops up, takes a few pop shots, gets some people taken down, and then keeps collecting those points. And at this point, they're almost near doubling the total points of the Subliners. And the New York Subliners lost a little bit of their momentum, a little bit of their composure, and the Ravens were kind of beating them to the punch on most situations. I believe Zero landed on one of the points in the cave, second point, and got 2 quick picks and then held it for a short period of time. But then the rest of his team wasn't fully there with him, and he got overpowered and overwhelmed. This first game, this first round ended up being a loss for the Subliners, and the score ended up being 148 to 250. So they beat him out by over 100 points, and then we're moving on into round 2. To do a quick breakdown of the game on Hardpoint, Azhir Cave, Temp came in with 14 kills, 28 deaths with a KD of 0.5, only 34 seconds on the clock. ZooMaa 24-27 with a 0.89 with only 21 seconds, one of the least, right there with 0. Attach had 26 kills, 21 deaths with a 1.24 KD. He definitely was running carry on this if you talk about KD. Not in terms of time, but he was probably more so backup. As we saw with accuracy, he was the one that was most on point in the game, and if you guys are curious, you can watch the reels on YouTube. But unfortunately, he just wasn't able to back that with a positive KD, so he wasn't able to hold the point much longer than a few. And unfortunately, since he wasn't able to get some of those picks, he wasn't able to hold as long as he probably would have intended. Probably was some discussion that he was going to be the guy that was holding point while others were to protect him, but unfortunately, he just didn't get the protection he needed. And last but not least, Zero guys, 24 kills, 25 deaths, almost an even KD, and he only held the point for 21 seconds, but he did have some really clean picks at some points. As for the opposing team, Wuskin with 26 kills, 15 deaths with a 1.73 KD. He was on objectives for the longest times for his team with over a minute and 10 seconds, which is pretty good. I mean, if you compare it to accuracy, they actually evened out pretty well. I think the big issue is the total time between the two teams. It was a comparison of 2.5 minutes to a total of 4 minutes, and that's why they accumulated so many points. I just think that across the board, the Ravens did better to consistently have someone on the point, and it wasn't just the same person every single time. As you can see, it's pretty fair balance. Scraps with 28 kills, 22 deaths with a 1.27 KD. Dylan with 24 kills, 20 deaths, 1.2 KD. Rated with 23 kills, 20 deaths, 1.15. Injured with 21 and 25 with the only negative KD on the team with a 0.84. And the other thing is, he wasn't even heavily low on your KD. A 0.84 is pretty impressive too if you think about it in comparison to the New York Subliners. Moving on to game 2, it is search and destroy on the map Piccadilly. This game mode concept is basically there are 2 bombs, and one team's to attack and one team is to defend. One team wants to plant to make a bomb explode on point on A or B, whatever their choosing is, while the other team defends and has to kind of strategize and lay out their team to balance the best that they can. Round 1, 0-0. Right out the gate, Wuskin jumps on top of a vehicle, looks across the map, shoots a shot through the smoke, and happens to land and connect a hit. Takes out one of the Subliners right out the gate. They're at a disadvantage 4-5. On top of that, guys, as some of the Raven players run down the mid, they actually take some pop shots from very tight angles through little literal slits between the 2 buses, and they're getting picks on these Subliners, and off balances the team and builds the confidence of the Ravens. The Ravens are then able to take over the map and get more control, and it results in them winning the first round. Also to mention on top of that, they did add pressure to the map when they had extra space because they had numbers. They planted the bomb. New York City Subliners were not able to capitalize because of 1, the time pressure, and 2, they were overpowered by numbers. Starting into round 2, Zero starts off with an early snipe pick on the Ravens, and that starts to help the momentum of the team. To end the result of the round, we'll speed through. Basically what ends up happening is it ends up becoming a 3v1. Subliners plant with the extra heads that they have against Wuskin. Wuskin actually turns around and 1v3s all of these guys and is able to get off the defuse. In my opinion, I think that it was poorly placed by the New York Subliners. I'm rooting for my team on it, but it was really tough because they couldn't really figure out where they wanted to be placed in terms of where the bomb was. And these guys are the pros. I'm not. This is just me looking from an outside perspective. There's a lot of pressure for Zero as the last guy standing in the situation because he was behind a building and he had to obviously peep to make sure that Wuskin wasn't defusing the bomb. And it was just really bad timing. He come around the corner to throw a grenade at the bomb site so then he could hopefully get the pick if he was defusing it. And Wuskin was actually just waiting for him to peek. So he shot him. And Zero wasn't even having his gun out at the time. He was literally throwing a grenade. So he got picked, and then Wuskin got the defuse, and it is 2-0. Ravens are up at this point. Round 3 was an absolute blowout. There's nothing to be said about it other than the Subliners got quick picks on the Ravens, and it ended up becoming a 5-0 round. So round 3, Subliners had 5 players and the other team was completely wiped out. It was all said and done within probably the first 45 seconds. So round 4, guys, is actually really cool because it was pretty much a repeat of round 2, where basically the Subliners had extra heads up and it ended up becoming a 3v1 again, I believe, with Wuskin as the one player on the Ravens. And this time they had better position, and I think that they learned from the first time that they wanted to spread themselves a little bit more with better angles to help sandwich that player that was going in for the defuse. So Wuskin was defeated on this point, on this turn, and he wasn't able to defuse the bomb. And at this point, it was 2-2 in Search and Destroy. So guys, rounds 5 through 8 in Search and Destroy were all won by the Ravens. So instead of actually going round by round on these, I'm just going to talk about some quick highlights and some special plays that I thought were really cool. So one to hit on actually wasn't even really a play, but Wuskin's twin brother Scraps actually got a TK. He shot his brother Scraps on accident through a snipe. There was no replay of it, but it happened on the stat board, and it gave him a disadvantage in the round, although they still did come out on top on round 5. Zero also got a really clean snipe from the sounds of it from the announcers and the kill feed, but it wasn't shown as well. Another cool play was Temp was behind a car underneath the car laying down, and Wuskin was up on top of the scaffolding shooting down at him, and he missed a snipe shot, and they were kind of going back and forth between their gunshots and hiding under cover, but in the end Temp ended up overcoming it because he could use deep impact, and he went through the wood and shot Wuskin, so that eliminated him, but still that resulted in a loss for the Subliners regardless of that special play. Two last notes and mentions about Search and Destroy that I think are really cool was Wuskin did another early spawn peek with a sniper rifle, shot through the smoke, made contact direct with one of the players' heads across the map. So one thing that I noticed from the Subliners that I don't know if it, was discussed for them per round, but Wuskin was really nailing down a lot of these early snipe hits, and basically I felt like that gave them obviously more of an advantage because they had more heads on the map, so it was easier for them to cover and conquer and control these areas. So I'm wondering if like the Subliners held back for a little bit more, or took that first few steps a little bit more cautiously, if they would be a little bit more successful each round. But unfortunately that wasn't the case. A lot of the situations where Wuskin got kills were through lucky pop shots from across the map early game. I shouldn't say lucky. They're definitely predicted, and they were really good educated shots, but at the end of the day he's shooting through smoke and getting hit, so part of it has to do with luck, but obviously prediction and understanding of map layout was huge in this portion. In the same match attempted the deep impact shot on Wuskin, Jerd of the Ravens actually came in clutch with a 1v2 at the end, and he cleared out the second to last guy, and then he cleared out the last guy with 11 shots left in his chamber. He had no other bullets left. He had to probably swap to a secondary at that point or use equipment if he had it. And it was a really close call, and no one really thought he was going to get it. I didn't think he was going to get it, especially with the situation of cover. The Subliner guy was behind the bomb, and Jerd kind of jumps out and just nails these shots. So unfortunately, it came out to a loss for the Subliners overall. All these rounds put together, in the beginning they started off strong. It was an even balanced game, and then unfortunately the Ravens end up taking over, getting extra momentum, getting some lucky shots, getting some skilled shots, and I just think that the Subliners made some mistakes here and there. I will say that ZooMaa did pop off every round. He was pretty consistent with his kill versus death aspect ratio, and I feel that if everyone else on the team performed equally, it probably would have ended up with a resulted win. The other thing was Zero. I was watching him. He was main running sniper, and I think that the problem was there was just really bad timing, unfortunately. Some of the shots he of course missed. He did get a sniper pick at one point, but there was parts I was watching where he was waiting and he was hard scoping down an alley in a line, and when he looked away, literally a Ravens guy would run across. Like, it was just really bad timing. So I think luck had a little role in this, but at the same time you got to give some respect to the Ravens because they did really pop off with a 6-2. It could have been a lot closer for sure. The stats for Search and Destroy, we will start with the New York Subliners as usual. The Temp got 6 kills, 6 deaths with an even KD. He got 1 plant off. Now, the plants weren't really super crucial in this game mode. Both teams didn't really do a lot of plants. The New York Subliners only got a total of 2 out. The other one was backed by accuracy. And for the Ravens, the plants were a total of 3, 2 by rated, 1 by Dylan. ZooMaa with a clutch carry with 12 kills, 7 deaths, 1.71 KD, attached 4 and 6, 0.67 accuracy. Unfortunately, only got 1 kill and 7 deaths, and that might have been detrimental to part of them winning rounds or losing. And same, unfortunately, for Zero. We know one of the kills that he got was off a sniper. I'm unsure on the second one, but he went 2 and 6. Because of these two guys, unfortunately, it's not to point fingers or blame, but if they were able to pick up the slack a smidge, they might have been able to turn around some of these rounds and maybe make this game a little bit more even. Wuskin, strong carry for the Ravens, 11 kills, 3 deaths, a 3.67 KD in Search and Destroy. Highly impressive. Insane snipes, as we saw in the clips. It is mind-blowing to see what this guy performed and how many lucky shots he got through some of the smoke. Scraps, 3 kills, 5 deaths, 0.6 KD. Dylan, 8 kills, 6 deaths. Rated, 3 kills, 5 deaths. Jerd, 7 kills, 6 deaths. And honestly, when you look at Jerd, I really think that cool kill he got at the end there with the 11 shots was quite impressive. I mean, it's a lot of pressure. I'm not sure if he even knew that he had 11 shots left, but if he did, that's a lot of pressure to be like, I need to nail these shots and get them perfect, and he did. Guys, the last round they played was on Hackney Yard. It was a round of domination. So basically, they would start on opposing sides of the map, and they'd have to capture three flags, and they basically wanted to see who could hold the most for the longest period of time. You accumulate points over time based on how many flags that you're holding down. So to start this off, guys, the Ravens jumped into this and they ran straight for B, and I think the big mistake that the Subliners made here early game was obviously they capped C while Ravens capped A, but then immediately afterwards the Subliners decided to go for a flank outside of B on the opposite side of the map. So it gave B an easy cap for the Ravens, where only like 1 or 2 guys wound up from the Subliners on the B point right out the gate. And I mean, I get what they were trying to do with the flank, but because that flank wasn't even successful, it was just an easy quick cap for the Ravens. First they got the cap point, and then they were really barely uncontested, so they took the cake and they got the points. At one point, ZooMaa held a 6 kill streak and he was doing really well, and there was also a really awesome play by Attach where he was jumping down on A point and he got 3 picks in the process. He almost recapped B at this point as well, and I feel like those are the things that they really needed, is long kill streaks where they could hold down a point and hold down these flags. Unfortunately, most of the time it looked like the Ravens just had map control. They knew what they were doing in terms of staying together and basically fighting a lot of their fights 2-on-1, and it was pretty much too much for the Subliners to handle. And basically every single time I saw Subliners getting a pick, they would pretty much die immediately afterwards, and then there was no one to really cover the Subliner that just got picked. So I think that the Ravens were able to capitalize on this and hold down most of the flags, and at one point I believe they even got all 3 flags. So it just wasn't looking good for the Subliners on this map, and to be honest, it's such a fast-paced one that you've got to have your comms nailed down, and you've got to get your picks, and it's seriously important. And at one point I think that Zero had a KD of something around 4 kills and I think like 13 deaths, and you really just can't be having that, unfortunately, in a game like Domination where you are dependent on getting these picks so you can recover and hold down flag. I think when I was looking at the map breakdown, the other big thing was Ravens were all stuck together. They would have like maybe 3 to 4 on one point at one time, and would really help them conquer these points on the map, while the other team would only have like 2 at most together. And because of that group up situation, they were just really easily dominated, and then they were easily able to reacclimate and control themselves while they were healing up while the Subliners were running it back. The final score for this one, guys, was 214 to 127. It was quite the blowout, and at one point the commentators were talking about it, and it was pretty obvious that the Subliners, if they wanted to pick it up and come back, they'd literally have to cap all 3 flags, and their biggest struggle was they couldn't even really hold down B for much longer than, I don't know, 10 seconds most. And the other thing was the Ravens just got a lot more captures, and because their KDs were so high and they were getting more kills per their death, they were just able to hold these down. And I mean, it makes obvious sense, but it just didn't seem like the Subliners were really holding their own in most of these 1v1 fights. They did well in some of the situations, but not consistently across the board. They had their pop-off moments, but then most of the time it was just them running and dying, running and dying, running and getting a pick, dying, and all their KDs were under a 1. The highest one on the list was a 0.89, and it's not something that, you know, hate gawk at or anything like that, but if that's the highest on the team, that's not good, because literally the lowest on the other team was a 1.0. So as you can see, there was no necessary carry on the Subliners, and there was no one really that was holding their own against this situation. Going to the scoreboard for Domination: Temp 23 kills, 26 deaths, 4 captures. ZooMaa with 25 kills, 28 deaths, 6 captures. Attach with 21 kills, 31 deaths, 5 captures. Accuracy 16 kills, 27 deaths, 5 captures. Zero 18 kills, 24 deaths, 1 capture. Unfortunately, Zero didn't get many captures, but he didn't do terrible with catching back up with the kills. I actually looked on my notes. He went 4 and 16. So if you think about him getting 14 kills over the next 8 deaths, is actually pretty impressive of a comeback. Now, if he had that from the beginning of the game, he might have been able to, you know, turn things around overall for the team. Wuskin of the Ravens, 32 kills, 14 deaths, 4 captures. Scraps, 22 kills, 22 deaths, 8 captures. Dylan popping off with 10 captures, watching that guy all over the map, just capping points over and over and over. 31 kills, 28 deaths. Rated 24 kills, 20 deaths, 7 captures. Jared with 27 kills, 19 deaths, 8 captures. If you look at the overall KD, they actually weren't super far apart, but the captures were what was crucial. What seemed to happen here is the Ravens just kept coming back, and they kept picking up the slack whenever they lost the flag, whereas it looked like the Subliners lost the flag and they weren't able to get back to them. They weren't able to recapture them, and I feel like that was the problem and what resulted in the loss of this round. The final breakdown, we're not going to go over each and every number. You guys can look at them for yourself. Pause the video if you have to, but total kills for the Subliners, 230. Total deaths, 290. Their KD overall was a 0.79. It's not the greatest. If it was held at roughly, I don't know, even a 0.95 or, you know, a 1.1, anywhere in that window, I believe they probably had a closer match than they did. The Ravens, on the other hand, had 309 total kills and 234 deaths with a result of 1.32 KD. I think that obviously if these teams are both set at about a 1 KD, that would make sense that these games would be more evenly laid out. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be even games. They still could be a blowout game if one plays the objective more while the other focuses on just getting the kills, but they aren't able to get to the point in time. All right, guys, so some final thoughts about this game is I really think that, you know, we're talking about the Subliners here. This is Subliner fan page. This is basically for all their stats and, you know, all the situations based around them, but we're going to talk about the other team as well. I just think that when it came down to it, obviously I didn't hear their comms and of the Subliners, but they just seemed a little bit disoriented and a little bit too staggered on the map, and I think that ended up resulting in their losses, and them not being able to handle a lot of the 1v1 situations really put them at a massive disadvantage on these objective based games. In comparison to the Ravens, they just seemed more split. They just weren't all together, and I felt like they weren't really accommodating for each other, whereas when I was watching the Ravens, it felt like the person that was capping points was well protected by a backup, and it happened a little bit with the Subliners, but just not as much. And, you know, because of that, because of all the total stack of support from one side or the other, that's why the Ravens kind of came out on top of the situation. But at the end of the day, I really do hope it's a learning experience. I'm curious to see what they're going to do with their roster tonight when they play against the Atlanta FaZe, and we'll see on that one as well. Guys, going over MVPs, I do want to talk about this a little bit because it wasn't all bad. I do want to mention who I think was the MVP for the New York Subliners. I believe that it was ZooMaa. When you looked at him in Search and Destroy, he absolutely murdered it. Went 12-7, so that was a 1.71 KD. And every single time I saw him in most of those fights, he was handling them very well, and his placement was pretty decent. The unfortunate part is every single time he died, I felt like he could have had it, but he pretty much was double teamed in almost every situation that I was watching or what I can remember. So, and on top of that, the stack, he did get that 6 kill streak in Domination, so he's holding his own. He's more consistent, I feel, overall. He had the highest KD along all 3 games, holding a 0.98, so I believe that the MVP went to him. In terms of the London Royal Ravens, I believe that one was pretty obvious. Wuskin kind of carried the team on his back, especially in Search and Destroy. He really showed off his skill set with that sniper, and he got those early picks that I think were really crucial to their wins per round. Even though he didn't have the highest amount of kills, his brother Scraps actually had him with 72 kills versus his current 69. He ran a 2.16 KD across all 3 of the maps, and I think that's pretty insane if you really think about it, especially going up against other pros. It seemed like his game sense, his placement on the maps, he understood where he needed to be at most times, and was even able to clutch up in that Search and Destroy 1v3 with a defuse. So it was really impressive. You got to give some respect to someone like that, and hopefully the Subliners can learn from that, and next time they fight these guys, they'll be able to beat them. Guys, that calls it for me here. Sledge315 over the New York Subliner game with the Ravens. Unfortunately, it was quite the blowout game, and it was tough to watch. But again, like I said, I hope that they learn something from it. I hope the coaches can learn something and they can come back strong against the Atlanta FaZe. Guys, until next time, I'll see you guys here. I'll be doing a recap of the Atlanta FaZe as well. If you guys have any questions, things that you guys want me to involve in more in these videos, please let me know. And of course, if you enjoyed the content, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. I will see you on the next one. Later.